So we've got Sarah, Dan and Chris all here to speak about the printing processes, the different printing processes that are found here in Melbourne. We're very blessed to have them all three here tonight, and you've even got a handout with a lot of technical terms on it. I can't get through it all. I'm sure Dan is going to get through it all and tell us everything we need to know. Hold on to your questions at the end, and please welcome me. Oh, not welcome me. Help me welcome. Chris, what's going on tonight? I've lost the plot. It's the last one, that's why. So Chris is our first speaker. He's an artist and a screen printer from Melbourne. With a background in graffiti and fine art, Chris started Dangerfork Print Co. in 2010, which quickly grew to be one of Australia's foremost fine art screen printing studios. He now dabbles with printmaking and collage in between producing print editions for some of Australia's leading contemporary artists. So please welcome me. What is going on? Please join me in welcoming Chris Drummond.
Thanks. So that was the first part of my talk about who I am, but thanks for coming. So firstly, just I guess a little bit about who I am and what Dangerfork is. I've come into this with a background as an artist. No real experience in the printing industry. The business Dangerfork is run with me and my wife here, Megan, who's at home with our children this evening. This photo was taken in our old studio in Richmond. But yeah, we are basically just a two-person band, and we've just brought on a third person working with us. So we're a very small company based in Collingwood at the moment. Okay, so next thing. So what we do. Basically, Dangerfork Print Co., there's two sides to the business. We are a printing service. We work specialising in screen printing on paper and digital Giclee printing, and we also run a print gallery. Basically two sides to the business. Next one. So the first, what is screen printing? So I'm not sure if many people here have got much experience with what screen printing is. It's, I guess, most commonly used for fabric, for doing t-shirts. We just print on paper, and the majority of what we do is we print, we do artwork, like limited edition artwork runs on paper. So it's actually a very lengthy process, really labour intensive. There's a lot of steps to getting your final print on paper. The first step is, I guess, art separation and film. So you'll see here on the right, there's a finished print. On the left, there's one of the colours. So each artwork that we print's got to be broken down into separate colours. Each of those colours is output onto a film, so it's a transparency film where we basically run it out of a big inkjet printer. From there, is a photographic process that we expose onto the screen. So in the next one. Okay, so screen and alignment. From there, once we've got each of the screens made, we have to align each colour individually onto the paper, and we go through and we print each colour at a time. So say if we're doing a run of 20 prints of 5 colours, we go through, print all of the first colour, all of the second colour, all of the third colour, all of the fourth colour, all of the fifth colour. So, if we're doing large runs, we just did a print, I think about 2 weeks ago. It was an edition of 200 with 10 colours. It took us about 2 weeks to print the whole thing. And then there was, I guess, the testing and separation process before that was another 2 weeks. So it was close to 5 weeks from when we got the artwork through to the finished edition being printed. So it is a very sort of long labour-intensive process. And then this one. So once we've got the screens, this is the manual table that we've got. The ink is then put onto the screen. There's a squeegee on the end of that big bar. It's pressed down and manually sort of pressed through the screen onto the paper. So there's, it's a really sort of tactile, hands-on thing, which is good. Okay. So what do we have to? Screen printing overview. So within our little studio, this is a picture of me and my printer James. We've got two tables. One's fully manual, the one on the left. The other one's semi-automatic. So it's basically just the up and down, the ink getting flooded and pulled is automated. We use that for large runs, just because of the stress it puts on your body, printing a lot. It's sort of lifting quite heavy things, pulling a lot. So when we're doing, up to a couple of thousand passes on a particular print, we tend to use the semi-automatic table. Both of them rely on manual registration. So each time we put the paper in, there's small tabs on the table. Sometimes we work with acetate film if we're working with paper with deckled edges, but basically each time we've got to realign the paper into exactly the same spot so that the colours will align when we go through the print process. All right. Hang on. Sorry, go back again. So I guess the applications that we do at our business are fine art printing. We do a lot of work for artists. That's probably the majority of our work. Somebody will come to us with an image, say I want an edition of 20, however many prints done. We'll run through the full separation, proofing, printing process for them. Posters, we've just gone into sort of doing more larger run band and film merch posters. A lot of, I guess, when bands are touring, they wanted something done. Hasn't been so big in Australia, but we're trying to push that. We're starting to get a bit of work doing that. We do stationery, invites, business cards. Not an awful lot of work doing that, but that is something that we also do, and we have some people who want that. Other side, Giclee printing. So this is basically just a really high quality inkjet print. This is good for low run artwork. We run through the whole process of image capture. So we work with a really sort of museum quality photographer who will can get the artwork photographs at a really high quality that we then sort of run through color correction, proofing, running the artworks out. The advantage of doing this is that you can just print one. With screen printing, because of the work that goes into the setup before we actually print anything, it's really, really expensive to print one, where this can be quite economical. On the other side, for larger runs, screen printing is actually much more economical than doing digital sort of Giclee printing. And the gallery. So alongside us working as a printing studio, we also have a small print gallery. We have a showroom in our studio down in Collingwood, and we also sell a lot of artwork through our website. How this works, all of the prints that we have are limited edition. So we will work with an artist, we'll commission an artwork, run through, separate, print the whole thing, get them all signed, all numbered, and then we'll sell them. So once the artwork, the edition sells out, that's it. So it is quite good, but again, we do all of the work beforehand, which isn't so good sometimes. All right. Okay, so inks. I guess a big part of any printing, and particularly screen printing, is what type of inks, and this is sort of what sets us apart from digital printing, is we've got a really broad range of inks that we can work with. So the majority of what we print mostly is with the water-based ink. We find that that's got really good colour. Particularly for the fine art printing on a thick cotton paper, it sort of sinks in really well. We do work with some solvent-based matte and gloss inks. They're just a little bit more, a little bit harder to work with. There's quite a few fumes and smells. that come from that. We've got fluorescent inks, metallic inks, glow in the dark. We did a job with ferrochromatic inks, so that's like the old the t-shirts that when you touch it, it changes colour. And we have done some experimentation for a job with UV sensitive inks. It was for a set of business cards. Basically, you put it out in the sun and then the print would appear, which was pretty cool. Didn't go ahead, but there was pretty cool working with that stuff. So yeah, there's like really, basically you can put anything through a screen, which sets it apart from the digital Giclee and also the offset printing. Okay, so next one, separation. So this is, I guess a really big part of the job is how the artwork is separated for print. I guess this is we have a lot of people come to us and they say, I've got this amazing artwork, can you screen print it? And a lot of the times it's like, no, or it's going to be, 20, 30 different colours to print it. So this is a job we did for, sorry, move back in here, architecture in Helsinki. It was a set of prints they had. It was the same artwork that was on their album cover. As you can see, there's the 4 separate colours. And the gradient through there is set up as a halftone. So with any gradients that are going to be screen printed, they get converted to halftone. I guess basically through a screen you can only print 100% or 0 of that particular colour. And this is something that we find a lot of artists that we work with they grapple a little bit with that concept. So if you came and you had a fully rendered grayscale image, we'd print that as just with one black ink. And it's each of the different levels of grey from 0 up to 100 of black are represented by a different size dot. This is something, if you're working with full colour images, it's quite an in-depth process to getting that looking good on a screen. Okay. So some of the other, I guess everything that needs to be screen printed, unless it's a single colour, has some sort of separation process. With our company, we do that all in-house, but a lot of the time we get the artwork in. So just going through some of the applications we've got. This is a 10 colour print we did for a local artist called Roan. This is printed with water-based ink, 10 colour halftone separation. So this was from an original painting that he came to us. We actually, we've got someone that we outsource to that does the initial file separation. Each of those channels are then converted to a grayscale image, which then is converted to dots. And then we just lay it up and did the print on this. So this is printed with water-based ink on a cotton paper. I think we did an edition of 200. And this is probably the most of what we do with our business. So working with artists, creating sort of editions of their artwork for them to then on-sell as individual art pieces. So this is another side poster. This is a poster we did for Ace Frehley tour that was here, a few months back. This is designed by a local studio in Collingwood called Keepsake Design. This is another thing that sets screen printing apart a little bit from other printing processes is that you can print directly onto black paper. This is a 3 colour print, and we basically have a really thick opaque ink that prints directly onto the paper. So for a lot of other applications, you'd have to print a white base, or you'd have to print all the colours and print a black on top to get this. So it really, it looks fantastic. The ink sits on top of the paper quite well. And stationery. This was another one we just did quite recently, fluorescent inks. You can get some really bold colours. And yeah, it's a sort of small example of some of the stationery stuff that we do. Okay, and then now talk a little bit about design process. This is one of my artworks that I did for we did a flyer for Carbon Festival last year to hand out in their show bag. I guess when thinking about designing for screen print, the most important thing is to think about designing in layers. We get a lot of artwork that comes into our business that it's a flat JPEG file or a flat PDF file. When it's separated, there's no ink sitting on top of each other. I find that's something that's really nice about screen printing, is that, you know, when you get one color of ink sitting onto another, by nature they're all a little bit transparent, so you get this layering that happens during the print process. I guess the other thing is just to embrace, you know, that it's a very hands-on process. So if you are thinking in designing something for a client or designing something for yourself to be screen printed, I guess embrace the process. There's a lot of different stages that it goes through. You know, your artwork may change a little bit from being what's on screen when you're looking at your computer through to the finished product. Like, as you can see here, there's you know, it picks up the texture in the paper quite a bit. You know, these colours were completely different to what it was on screen, and then particularly that overlap colour was, you know, really different. We did a job for Melbourne Food and Wine Festival 2 years ago, and we had the designer coming in, and he designed something very like this, two overlapping colours, and they were dead set on trying to get a specific colour on the overlap. And we tried and tried and tried, but it was just like, you know, you can't really get a blue from mixing a yellow and an orange together. So it was just something that to keep in mind if you are designing for screen print, is to just, I guess, research into the process a little bit, and, you know, design your artwork in layers. It's printed in layers. It's printed, you know, one color at a time. Set up your artwork with, you know, separate layers. Design on those layers. Move them apart a little bit. You know, allow a little bit of room for error in that. And you know, because if you've got, say, a whole lot of artwork just butted right up against each other, if it's out 1 millimeter, it could completely change the aesthetic of the artwork. And you know, it may look great as a digital print or as a painting or as in its original format on screen, but going through this process, it may change and come out very different. So it's just about, I guess, setting your expectations with what you want to get out of screen printing. Okay, and on to the last one. So this weekend, this Saturday, we've got an open studio. About 15 months ago, we moved into a studio in Collingwood with an art collective called Everfresh. We work in a quite large building just on Perry Street. Once a year, the guys open the studio up. Last year, we had about 2,000 people come through on the day, so it was quite big. We've got our gallery open. We've got all our equipment sort of there. We've got me and James sitting around just willing to talk to anyone about screen printing, about what we do. It's a pretty interesting place. There's a lot of stuff there. So yeah, if you're sort of interested a bit more in having a look at the gallery, or you know, just having a look at the studio, come down and say hello. All right, and that's it.
This has been fantastic. Thank you, Chris. Can you all hear me? That's good. Okay. Next to Sarah Campbell and Dan. Dan, I just want to give you a big hug. You're such a sweetie. So Simplethings Press is a boutique letterpress printing and design studio run by designer Sarah Campbell and master pressman Dan. Now, am I pronouncing it correctly? Is it Kuhl? Kuhl by name. Oh, Kuhl by name. Look, you're making me blush. All right. Sarah is a letterpress printer and graphic designer with years of experience in wedding stationery design. Dan is an indentured letterpress printer with City and Guilds of London Institute certification in letterpress printing and over 45 years of experience in the industry. Between them, Sarah and Dan have over 55 years of combined experience in letterpress and design. So please join me in welcoming Sarah and Dan.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you all for coming. I'm Sarah Campbell from Simplethings Press, and thank you to Redbubble for inviting us to speak here tonight and to Dom for organising. We thought this sounded like a fun opportunity to talk about something that we really love, which is letterpress printing. So I'd like to first introduce my colleague Dan Kuhl. Dan is our master pressman at Simplethings Press, and he does the bulk of our letterpress printing. Dan has more experience than anyone I know in print and letterpress, and with over 45 years in the industry, he bloody well should. So our talk today is split into two parts. Dan is going to talk first about the history of print and what letterpress was back in the day that he first started learning the trade. And then I'll speak briefly about how Simplethings Press came to be and about what modern letterpress is now, and where, I guess, past and present collide to make what we now sell today. And over there on the bench top, we also have some show and tell for you to look at perhaps afterwards, which are examples of the stationery that we print, because letterpress is really something that you need to touch to fully appreciate, and you've got a handout there as well, which is letterpress printed. So now over to Dan for part one.
Thanks, Sarah. That was very nicely said. And thank you all for coming tonight and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about something that's been very close to me for a long, long time, and that's letterpress printing. Print's pretty much a part of everybody's life. It's there just about every day in everything we do, from a can of baked beans to a postage stamp or a newspaper to a banknote. They're all printed one way or another. But the majority of the general public, they just don't know what's behind it. They get that product, the magazine or the newspaper, and they don't know what goes into it to get it there. I've always likened being a printer as to being a member of a special club. You'll find you get a couple of printers together at a pub or down a party, and they'll be the ones huddled over in the corner talking about work, talking about printing, because it's a very, very interesting trade. It's steeped in history, the driving technology, and actually the third largest manufacturing business in the world. With the advent of computers, I had a lot of people saying to me, and they still say it now, oh, all this computer stuff's killing print. And my stock standard reply to them is to say, well, you take a walk down the newsagents and then you tell me how many magazines there are about computers, because there's heaps of them. Generally speaking, there are 5 processes. There's digital, offset lithography, that's both sheet-fed and web. So sheet-fed is the more short-run stuff. Web offset is like printing from a really big dunny roll, and that's where all the magazines and newspapers come from. Silk screen, which our mate Chris just told us all about, and flexography, and what we're going to talk about today, which is letterpress. Historically, it was Gutenberg who invented movable type by casting a mixture of lead, tin and antimony to form the typeface. Now, that same mixture of the alloy is being used today, 500 years later. The monks called the trade the devil's art, effectively doing them out of a job because they were hand scribing the Bible and the scripture. William Caxton, he was the first British pressman, and in the mid-1400s he took the first printing press into England, which is where I come from, you may have guessed. Now, bit of my history. This is going back to 1960. My dad was an electrician by trade, and from the age of about 6, my dad used to take me out regularly with him. And one of the places that we visited is still there today, it's called Times Drawing Offices off Regent Street in London. And that's where I saw my first Heidelberg T-platen running. I was fascinated by it. I would have been about 7, I reckon. And every time we went to the Times drawing offices to do a job, you'd find me down in the cellar with the printers. He was showing me what to do. Now, the guy who owned the joint, he offered me an apprenticeship there to take me through it, but unfortunately my folks moved out of London and down to the suburbs in Maidstone, so I finished that one. But when I finished school at 16, this was 1970. I got a job with a company called the Kent Arms Printing Works, Marden in Kent. And I was taken on as an indentured letterpress machine minder apprentice for, well, it was supposed to go for 5.5 years, but it only went for 5, so they let me off with good behaviour, I think. I was shown how to operate a Heidelberg 10x15 T-platen by tradesmen and journeymen that have been in the industry for generations. Back then, I was working with movable lead type, and this is called monotype, and this is the process on the screen now. On the right-hand side there, you can see the keyboard, right? It's a standard QWERTY keyboard on one side and the other side spacing. But there's an absence of a screen. Nobody could actually see what they were typing. All they had was a hard copy that would go up on the left-hand side there, and for every keystroke, there was a hole punched in that tape you see up the top. Once they finished setting it, they'd take the tape off of the typesetter and put it onto the casting machine, monotype machine over in the left-hand side there. One of the most repugnant machines I've ever seen, but you put the tape on it, start the machine up, and the tape starts feeding through. And for every hole, there's a pin that goes through the hole and moves a matrix to correspond with the character that had been created by pushing a key on there. The matrix clamps down, and molten lead under pressure is squirted into it, and one piece of type is formed. The end result was that, which is called a galley of type. A galley is the tin thing it's sitting on. But remember, nobody's actually read this output yet. So the next thing to do is to run a galley proof. The surface of the type's inked up on a proofing press, and then take a pull, which is run a sheet of paper across the top and then pull it off. And that goes into the proofreader, who goes through the proof, does all the corrections, marks it out on the sheet, and then the galley and the corrected proof goes to a compositor, or a comp we used to call them. He'd do the hand bench work, so where there was a mistake, say there was a space in the wrong place or a full point wrong, he'd take that out and replace it, and run another proof, and that'd go into proofreading again, and if it was all good, that'd go off to the customer. But remember, this is 1970, and there was no email. There was only one way of getting that proof to the customer, and that was stick it in the post or get in the car and take it yourself if it was urgent. If any of you are familiar with desktop publishing, you would have seen something in there, one of the menu commands called leading. Well, leading in the comp room is actually spacing the lines of type out and get a 1-point lead and put it between each line of type to space the page out so that it fitted. Once we got final approval, the job went into production, and that's where it got imposed into a chase. What you see in there is a metal frame that a guy's holding up. There's 4 pages of type. Up the top there's coin keys, which clamp everything into place so you can actually lift it out, because the next step is to get it onto the machine. The first job on the machine is to get the position right, or posi as we call it, and that's setting the press up so you get correct paper size, and then move the job around in the chase to make it in the right spot on the press. There was no crop marks back in the 70s, so it was all about measuring it with a ruler or folding it up and making sure it all backed up correct. Once position's finalised, then the make ready starts on the machine, and it's all about pressure, because that's what letterpress is. When you took the first pull, sometimes, well always, the text would be lighter in some areas than the other, and the only way you could make that up was by patching a sheet up with tissue paper to bring the height up. And then you put that sheet underneath the top sheet on the machine, take another pull, and it'll all start to level out. But some of the make readies on the bigger press, like this Heidelberg cylinder, it could take up to a day to get it ready to run, so it's quite a long process. 4 colours was the absolute best doing it on letterpress. It was a very, very slow process, and I'm going to ask you something tonight, and we can talk about it later at question time if you want, but I wonder if anybody in the room knows what the K in CMYK actually stands for.
That'll be our game question. You're not allowed to answer.
And printers absolutely have their own language. A lot of it's on the terminology on the sheet you gave me tonight. I'll have to read this because there's so much of it. We had non-pulls, reglets, pikers, points, muttons, nuts, chases, coin keys, progressive proofs, and there's something else for you to ask me about afterwards if you want. Type lice. My apprenticeship as a letterpress machine minder, as I said, lasted 5 years. I was taught by journeymen who had been in the trade for generations. And nepotism in print is still rife. Family members are always employed. Back then we were taught to just kiss the paper with the impression, and I used to get in real strife if you could really see through the back of the sheet with the impression sticking through. But in 1975, letterpress was really dying off. It was just about gone. Offset lithography had taken over. It was much, much quicker, easier, but still didn't get the results of letterpress in as much as sharpness. So when I finished my time in 1975, I left letterpress and I went and worked on the newspapers up in the Midlands on web offset. Now, Sarah and me met about a year ago, yes, about a year ago, through a trade acquaintance. Sarah had just bought herself a Heidelberg Platinum. That wasn't one of the eBay ones, was it? No. And she asked me if I'd be prepared to teach her how to use it, and I said yes. I see she really wanted to have a go, you know. I've been in the industry for over 40 years now and hadn't touched a Heidelberg Platinum for about as long. But as soon as I started the machine up and started printing on it again, my hands, I'll never forget it, were just going, and I thought, bloody hell, how did that happen? You know, I didn't remember doing that, but I guess it's like riding a bike. You'd never fall off once you've learned once, do you? Working on the Platinum's really quite therapeutic, and I'm really excited that the trade's coming back in again now, because letterpress has morphed into something that people now want and love. And guess what? Sarah's going to tell you all about it.
Thank you, Dan. I guess the easiest way for me to start is to tell how I got involved in letterpress to begin with. That's one of our invitations. It was about 2005. I had a desk job working in marketing, one of those cube farm things, and I hated it. And I realised that having been my third office job of that nature, that I wasn't meant to work in an office. I really wanted to do something creative, and I really, really wanted to be self-employed. I realised that I loved business and I wanted to have one. I just didn't know what kind of business it was. But as part of my job at this place, I had to design and produce all of their marketing materials, which was not something I actually knew when they hired me. But pretty quickly I realised that what they actually wanted was a desktop publisher, which I wasn't. So basically I had to suddenly learn graphic design on the fly. I suppose I had to learn Creative Suite, so Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop, and I had to learn about print so that I could get my job done, really. So as part of this, I used to go for a walk. Well, I found these digital printers just down the road, and I used to go for a walk every day, partly just to get out of the office. But I would just walked in there one day and basically said, "Can you help me? I need to create this and I don't know what I'm doing." And they were awesome. They did help me. And I just started learning more and more about print. And eventually I ended up spending more time down at the printers than at my desk. I used to go back to my desk and my boss was like, "You've been at the printers again, haven't you?" I was like, "Yes, I have." But I was doing work. And at that time, that was when I realised that I really loved print and I was fascinated by print, and I also really loved design. So also as part of this job, I had a lot of time on my hands, which it turns out was fortuitous, although at the time I remember feeling very bored. But it was one of those jobs where you're sitting there for 8 hours a day, but there's really only maybe 2 hours actual work. So I had a lot of time to kill on the internet. And that was where I first came across Letterpress on a design blog. And I think around then I also came across a Letterpress card in a bookshop. And I remember touching it and touching something like that with the impression in the paper, and I remember loving it and just wanting to know, how is that actually made? How do you get that push into the paper? So I started researching, and that led me to this, which was the very first press that I owned. It's called an Adana tabletop platen. So it weighs about 15 kilos and it's designed to sit on the surface of a table. At the time, my husband and I were living in an apartment in Sydney, and I knew I wanted to get into letterpress, but I couldn't afford, I didn't have the space for one of the floor presses, which you'll see coming up. So I ended up with one of these. And that's what I started printing on. So you just move the handle up and down, the little rollers you can see come up over the circular thing, which is the ink disc, and the rectangular black thing in the middle is the chase. So you'd mount your base inside the chase, whack your plate on, ink it up, and take a pull, as Dan would say. So I started my business selling imitations printed on this, but I pretty quickly realised that it is kind of just a toy. It was great to start on, but there are definite limitations. So with any platen press like this, they have a sweet spot in the centre of the chase that I mentioned earlier. So although it says Adana 8x5 and you think you could print an area that is 8x5, you really can't. You can only get any impressional strength in sort of a sweet spot maybe that big in the kind of centre of the chase. So you know how that works better than I do, but it's to do with the clamshell operation of the platen. Yeah, so basically I realised, okay, I can kind of print what I want, but I'm not satisfied with this. I'll need something bigger. And then I graduated to one of these, which are called, these are the Chandler and Price floor presses. So these are my second, third and fourth presses. So I still have 3 of these. They're in varying sizes or chase sizes. So I've got one 8x12, one 9x13 and one 10x15. And this is exactly what happens with letterpress. So once you start, and be warned, once you start, you constantly want to acquire equipment. And this is something that all printers do, Dan as well. You start on something and then you realise you want to go to the next stage, so you just need something else. It's a bit of an addiction, but it means it's not safe to go on eBay anymore because you can't be trusted not to buy something, like Dan mentioned, and definitely not if you've been drinking wine. Don't go on eBay, because that's how I bought my last one of these, which I really didn't need, but I just couldn't resist. But anyway, so I taught myself how to use these. They're operated, you can hook up a motor, but the ones that I ran and still run, one is motorised, two are just operated by the treadle. That little kind of pedal thing at the bottom is called a treadle. And that big wheel with the spokes in it is called a flywheel. So you pull the flywheel, you pump the treadle with your foot, and you pull the flywheel with one arm, and you pop the paper in, and the rollers do their thing, go up and down over the form, which is inside the chase, and you print one piece of paper one at a time. So using one of these things, they're great for lots of things. Again, it was another really good press to kind of get me to where I am now, I suppose, in letterpress. It's not mechanical. They can be scary getting the rollers on and off. I remember clipping my fingers a few times and thinking, oh my God, that really hurts. But I never thought I was going to hurt myself using one of these. But yeah, it was hard work, took hours to print a job, very time consuming and laborious. But I sold all of my stationery on these presses up until very recently, and my business grew. Well, there's a few more pictures of the Chandler and Price. So in the middle you can see the platens open, and you can see the chase with that gridded base is a gridded aluminium base, and you can just see the top of a polymer plate poking out, and that circular thing at the top is the ink disc, and there's the rollers going up and over the ink disc. So this leads me to my favourite press of all, which is the Heidelberg 10x15T Platen. That's a photo of Dan's press, and I have one that looks almost exactly the same. So I bought this thing, but I'm a woman that can't change a tyre, and I did not know how to use it. I knew I wanted to use it, but I just didn't know where to start. It's like a car as far as I'm concerned, or it was like a car at the time. And then, as Dan said, through an acquaintance, I met Dan, who taught me how to use this platen, and just so happened that all of his experience had been from working on one of these things. And that also led to us working together. We realised that we work really well as a team due to our very different but complementary skills. So Dan is the printer, and I do all the design and artwork and sales and deal with customers and marketing and all that kind of stuff. So that's where we are now, and we now print all of our stationery on one of these. The Chandler and Prices we do still use now for things like little tags and items that are too small to put through the platen, because there is a certain size after which you can't really run it through effectively. And we use them for very short runs. So Dan has one of these, and his one is called Percy, and I have one, and her name is Wilder, because at first I thought she was a little bit too wild for me to be using. So that's a photo of one of our invitations. Dan's talked about what letterpress was in the past, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is now. So modern day letterpress. So many people currently in letterpress are designers. Like me, they don't necessarily have a print background. And the reason for this, and what has changed everything, is the invention of these things, which are photopolymer plates. So here is a picture of a plate that has black ink on it post-printing. So we've already mounted this plate, inked it, run the job, and then this is just a photo of the plate afterwards. But if it hadn't already been used, it would just be that sort of yellow colour without the black on the top. So because of these plates, letterpress has experienced a massive revival, not just in Australia but all over the world, originating I think in the UK, but America, everywhere is in love with letterpress. So these plates are what have attracted designers and people like me to letterpress, and the reason for that I think is because anything that I can create in Illustrator can now be made into a plate and printed letterpress. And that is pretty cool because exactly opposed to what Dan was talking about with lead type, plates open up a world of possibilities that just weren't there back then. So as you can see in this pic, the image is reversed when it's output to plate. So the image is essentially back to front. So the plates have an adhesive back, which is stuck or mounted onto the base and then inked. And this is the same plate you can see but flipped around to the other side. So you can see the adhesive over the top of the actual plate. So we would pull that adhesive off and then flip it and mount it in the correct position in order to print the job. And this is how the image will print once it's mounted and we run it. So here's an example of just a floral illustration that designed in Illustrator, made into a plate. There's another example, an illustration of a wreath. So if you can imagine, I mean, Letterpress definitely has certain limitations and capabilities. Large solid areas, Dan will touch them, I will not. But certain things work much better in Letterpress than other things. So fine illustrations, details, typography is perfect for Letterpress, fine lines, big chunky things, not so much, because it's all determined by impression. So yeah, these are all examples of what we can design in software like Illustrator and then output to plate to be printed Letterpress. So Dan's spoken about kiss impression, and back in the day, kiss impression was the correct technique and deep impression was really frowned upon. Here's an example of a kiss impression and also some inconsistent inking, which may or may not be some of my early work, but you can see it looks like the image, looking at that tree, just sits flat on top of the surface of the paper, almost as if it was digitally printed, but it's not. That's letterpress. It's just not very good. And this is deep impression. So these days, if people are paying for letterpress, they want it to look like that. So you can see the white edges around each letter and that sort of pillowy effect. We're printing onto premium, expensive imported cotton papers that really take that impression beautifully. So that's the kind of look that you get these days with modern deep impression letterpress. And because we're using photopolymer plates, and they tend to be, most of what we do is wedding stationery, so they're just one-off jobs, so we can essentially smash the plate, and because we're not reusing it. Yeah, so if a client is paying a premium for letterpress, it's not due to the need to get plates made. The materials, so paper, the need to pay someone, a specialist like Dan to print it, because of and the time required, the make ready, setting up the job, making it look perfect, running it. These are not cheap things. So because of that, letterpress attracts a big price tag. And because clients are paying a lot, they really want to see letterpress. They want something they can run their fingers over and see and feel. It is a balance, however, between deep impression and not going so deep that you have what is known as show-through, and Dan mentioned that also. You don't want too much impression is ugly. It shows through on the back of the card, and you could sometimes, if you're really going over the top, you'll see the outline of the plate around the image, and that's definitely not good. So now to talk, that's one of our letterpress and foil stamped invitations. So the blue is letterpress, the body text, and then the client's names are done in silver foil stamp. So to talk a little bit more about the business and commercial side of things, it starts with our product. It's no accident that our invitations are really simple and clean in terms of design, and Simplethings Press is named for precisely that reason. My design style is really simple, and that's because I'm self-taught. So I naturally, I think, shy away from anything that's overly complicated. I like simplicity, and whether my style came first or whether letterpress came first, I don't know, but letterpress suits my style really well. I think that letterpress is best suited to simplicity when it comes to design. You can have a piece of paper with one word in the middle and tons of white space all around it, and if it's letterpress printed, it will look beautiful, and you could frame it and put it on a wall and someone will walk past it and notice it, and that's because of the tactile nature of letterpress. So this is sort of what we're known for, which is a really simple, restrained, predominantly typographic style. And our work appeals to both bride and grooms. It's quite unisex. It's not overly girly. We do have some girly stuff, but lots of it really suits the modern couple who are making decisions about their wedding choices together. So lots of brides really want their partner to like the invitations as well. So we get a lot of couples that don't want pink and bows and diamantes and all that kind of stuff. This slide shows the dye, the magnesium, Dan? Yeah, the magnesium dye that is used to make that Matthew and Hahn, that was printed in or foil stamped from this thing. So just on selling letterpress, yes, letterpress is very beautiful and romantic and luxurious, but you have to know what sells and how to sell it. If you're trying to make a living out of letterpress, which my living is letterpress and Dan's living is letterpress, then we both have to know how to market it and how to sell it. If you can't sell letterpress and you are trying to pay your mortgage, all you've really got is just a really expensive hobby, because all the equipment and paper and plates and stuff isn't cheap. So marketing is really important. Website is crucial. We're essentially online. We have 2 separate studios, but we essentially sell everything through the website. So website is really, really important. Being across social media, Facebook, great product photography is really important. Customer service, and obviously producing a quality product. So we use imported cotton papers. We're perfectionists when we print something. Packaging is important. Just presenting a product that looks like what the client has paid for. Finishing the product. So finishing is once Dan or I have printed it, we've got the actual invitations in a box, and then we need to count out what the client's ordered. They might have ordered 60. Our minimum run is 50, for example, which, similar to what Chris was saying, due to certain built-in overheads, I suppose, like plates, labour, setup, all that kind of stuff, it's not feasible to just print 1 or 2. I could print 1 or 2, but I would still charge you for 50 because of that reason. So, so it's counting out the job, counting out the envelopes, putting things in cello bags, adhering labels to envelopes, eyeletting tags. What else do we do, Dan? It's basically just putting the product together, and all that stuff is really, really time consuming actually, so need to hire someone, Dan. Well, we do. We have a packaging assistant, but I think we could do with maybe 1 or 2 more actually at the moment. So next, it's also important to keep up with trends in stationery and what's fashionable. So that's having a feel for what is popular and what is going to sell. And also understanding what techniques are in fashion. So foil stamping again, or foil press as we call it. Foil is huge at the moment and really sellable, and everybody wants it. We weren't selling it a year ago. No, or 6 months ago we weren't even selling it, and then we realised, okay, we're getting all these requests for foil, let's get on it and start doing foil. And now we're doing a lot of foil, in addition to letterpress. Letterpress is still 80% and foil is maybe 20%, and the combination of foil and letterpress is really popular as well. So now we're back to the Heidelberg, which is which represents the last thing that I had to say, which is, I think, if you're going into business and if you're first starting a business, it's really easy to compare yourself to what other people are doing and feel inferior and look at your work and think, oh my God, I can never have it look the way I want. And I know personally I definitely stuffed around a lot at first because I'm a perfectionist, and I felt like there was a long way to go from where I was to where I wanted to be. And for me there was a massive learning curve. I didn't know design, I didn't know print. I felt like there was too much to learn and I didn't want to be crap. But eventually I realised that you kind of have to be crap at first, and it doesn't actually really matter. You get better as you go along, and it's a learning process. So for me, I think it boils down to being really determined and really stubborn even, or as Dan would say, to have a bit of fire in the belly. You need that, and just heaps of hard work. If you know you want to do it and you're willing to work hard, then I think if you have all of those things and the only thing you're lacking is technical knowledge, then if you want to do it, just do it anyway, because you can always learn what you don't know. And then you get to meet someone like Dan who teaches you all this other stuff you didn't know. So thank you for having us. It's been great being able to speak about something that we're passionate about to people that are interested to hear it. That's the best group of people to talk to. So thank you, and we hope you enjoy your letterpress souvenirs to take home and stick on the fridge. That's it.